In this lesson, we're going to learn a workflow for automatically disabling expensive nodes using an expression and a controller. So I've just opened up 06_begin, and here at the bottom of our script we have two TVI scales. Now if you're not familiar with the TVI scale, I don't blame you. It's a relatively obscure node, but it essentially doubles the size of an image, but it does it in a very intelligent and sharp way. Now normally we would not do this twice in a row, but these are one of the most expensive nodes inside of NUKE, and since we're doing it 2 times, we're essentially multiplying the amount of image information by 16 factors, I believe, so we end up with an incredibly large image, almost a 4K image. Obviously this slows down a lot. Now in this lesson we're going to learn about disabling nodes and doing it with an expression. Now of course if you don't have a TVI scale, you probably do have some expensive nodes inside of your node graph, like the most blurs are relatively expensive, as well as defocus is an expensive node, as well as the remapping nodes like the STMap node are expensive nodes to process. So while we're working and editing, we probably want them disabled so that we can get a preview update quickly and accurately, so that we can come in and of course iterate over our composition. So let's now take a look at disabling and where it happens. So let's open up this TVI scale node and hit the D key, and that is of course to disable or re-enable something. And a node's disable control is always stored under the node tab. So if we jump over here, we can see we have a disable or an enable. So we can actually control this using an expression. Now before we do that, let's actually create a new node to control all of these expensive nodes. And I call this a controller, and I like just creating an extra node off to the side so that it'll remember where it is. Of course, if you want, you can make any node a controller node, but again, I prefer removing it from my script so I know that it's a special node. So I'm just going to use a constant here, hit tab, type in constant, and again, it doesn't really matter what node we use as long as it can be disabled. And just so I can see it a little easier, I'm just going to make it pure red, and let's call this our disable node controller. Alright, so now let's make sure, let's tie this into a connection so that if we hit D on this disable node controller, it disabled both of these TVI scales. So to do that, let's go over to the node and the disable, and let's right click and add an expression. So this is going to be a slightly longer expression. I suppose it's not too long, it's only 7 lines here, but let's add in a few extra lines and then increase the size of our window so we can do this. And the first thing we need to do is we need to find the value of our disable node controller. And to do that, we can type in the open bracket and type in value and then a space, root dot name of our node, so it's the disable node controller or whatever you name that node, and then dot, and then the knob we want to access, so in this case disable. And then to finish off this command, we, as we can see here at the bottom, we need to close it with a close bracket. Let's click OK, and now we can see there's been an expression made between our disable nodes and our TVI scale. And our TVI scale is still disabled, but it has changed its view, or it's changed so that we only see a single slash. And that's telling us that this disable is being controlled by an expression on another node. Let's test this out. Let's hit the D key. Our node enables and begins getting processed. Hit the D key again, it becomes disabled. Okay, great. So now we could copy this expression over to the rest of our nodes and it would work how we needed it to. However, let's say we want to be able to disable the TVI scale node independently of our controller. If we select it and hit the D key, you'll notice it says A here and nothing happens. That's because it's being tied again to that expression, and the expression is overriding any values we set on that property. Now to get around that, we can come in and modify our expression to say if this node is disabled, then set this as disabled. Otherwise, set it as whatever this value is. Whether it's checked on or off, it doesn't matter. The only thing we know we want is that if this controller is turned off, we want the node to be turned off as well. So to do this, let's go to disable, edit expression, And again, let's give ourselves just a little more space here. And we'll need to, again, create an open and close bracket. So I'm just going to open, and at the end here, do a closed back bracket. And next, we need to put in a command. So let's use the if-else command. So if our value here, or if the, we need a curly bracket actually at the top here. So if, and then we can just copy this line here. If the value is disabled, close curly bracket, space, then we can open the curly bracket and return a value. So let's return 1, which is turning on disabled, or is disabling it. All right, so after we've returned the value, let's close our bracket because that's all we want to do for this if statement. And next, let's come in and say if it's not on, else, or if the disable on our main controller is off, what do we want to do? Else, open curly bracket, let's return the value. So the value is whatever is on this node. So this expression is essentially saying if this controller is on, or if it is disabled, set this as disabled. If it is not disabled, set it to whatever the value is on this specific node. So to finish this off, we just need a last curly bracket, and let's just delete this last line because again, we are doing this calculation here inside of this if statement. So if it is disabled, return 1, otherwise return this value. Not pretty simple. Let's click OK. And we can see here now that we can control the disabling of this node, but if we have the controller disabled, our TVI scale will always be disabled. So you can hear me hitting the D key, and I do not regain that control until I have undisabled my controller. So now that that's done, we can simply copy and paste this expression. So let's just copy the values here. So let's just go to our expression and copy that. So copy the expression and go to whatever other nodes we want to control the disable, right-click disable, add expression, hit paste, click OK. And now all of these nodes are being controlled by our controller here. Just to show that it works on everything, let's go to our defocus node, go to the node here, right-click disable, add an expression, hit paste, hit OK, and we can now see that our node controller is controlling all 3 of these nodes. So now if we want to go in and hit render, all we have to do is pause the viewer up here, hit the D key, and then hit the render button, if we of course had a right node here, and it would process normally. And then once the render was complete, we could hit the D key and continue working or editing various other nodes inside of our tree without having to worry about these slower nodes slowing down our entire workflow. Now this isn't the whole story. We can actually tie all of this up in a neat little wrapper with the right node Python commands before render and after render. But this lesson is getting a little long, so let's jump into that in the next lesson. So in this lesson, we took a look at how we could disable expensive nodes very quickly and easily by creating our own controller node and then using expressions to tie them in, along with being able to continue to disable them independently of this controller node.